We all already know about the fundamental role of the United States as a superpower. By the way, this designation of superpower is due to two main reasons. The first is the ability of its armed forces to operate globally, and more importantly, the second is the ability to destroy the planet with its nuclear warheads. We've already seen the introduction to nuclear war here on the channel, and today we're going to look at the situation of the United States' nuclear program in today's video. But before that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, share the video with everyone you know, and leave your like. And also consider following the Telegram group and Instagram to stay up to date with the channel's updates. My name is Adriano Peta, and this is World Geopolitics. A large part of the United States doctrine on nuclear weapons is related to the so-called Nuclear Posture Review, which was included in the 2022 National Defense Strategy. This and other documents describe how Washington views atomic weapons and when it considers using them. It is clear from this that the United States is not a state that commits to not using nuclear weapons first. On the contrary, they state that the United States would likely use nuclear weapons in cases they consider extreme, focusing on the defense of interests that the United States and its partners and allies consider vital. However, although they do not guarantee that they will not use them first, at the same time, the United States doctrine rejects the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons against countries that do not have nuclear weapons and are parties to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In other words, they are saying that the use of nuclear force will only occur in cases involving another nuclear power, or if it is a country that is violating the Non-Proliferation Treaty or perhaps is trying to become a nuclear power. The American document states that the need for nuclear weapons has recently been driven by the fact that the United States now has at least two main nuclear competitors and still needs to deal with a nuclear North Korea. Therefore, in case deterrence fails, the strategy says that the United States will strive to end any conflict with the lowest possible level of damage and under the best achievable conditions for the United States and its allies and partners. And it is this assurance of commitment to allies and partners that makes the United States policy something that deserves our attention. Because the United States has long established that it must limit nuclear proliferation. After all, fewer countries with nuclear weapons can, in theory, be better when it comes to the United States geopolitical context. And one of the ways they achieve this is by putting several allies and partners under their so-called nuclear umbrella, that is, guaranteeing the responsibility of defending these allies and partners. In other words, the United States will use its nuclear weapons to deter any nuclear attack on these allies if in exchange that ally gives up having its own nuclear weapons. Of course, this helps to strengthen alliances and American influence around the world, but on the other hand, it requires a nuclear arsenal capable of providing this kind of protection. The United States has often stationed nuclear weapons in countries like Belgium, Germany, Italy, or Japan under the control of American personnel, but they would be given to the aircraft of that host nation in case of conflict. To meet these various strategic commitments, the Federation of Atomic Scientists estimated that in 2023, the United States had the second largest number of warheads in the world. The American doctrine consists of the so-called nuclear triad, which includes 400 land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles of the Minuteman EII type, Trident missiles launched from Ohio-class nuclear ballistic submarines of the United States Navy, and a mix of nuclear cruise missiles and conventional bombs delivered by Air Force bombers or by some multi-role fighter. In total, this amounts to approximately 1,770 deployed warheads, plus 1,938 warheads reserved in case the first 1,700 weapons of mass destruction are not enough, and an additional reserve of more than 1,500 warheads just waiting to be dismantled. But there is a catch from the standpoint of these devices' capabilities, because many of these delivery systems and warheads are getting excessively old. Since the end of the Cold War, the United States' nuclear power has been maintained only by refurbishing warheads and the remaining delivery systems. From what we know from public documents, the United States did not build any new nuclear warheads in the 90s, the 2000s, or the 2010s. The policy during the Obama era was clearly against the development or deployment of new nuclear weapons. The National Nuclear Security Administration carried out life extensions, usually adding 20 to 30 years to the lifespan of these weapons. Or, in other cases, it modified existing warheads to fix possible defects, improve safety, replace limited life components, or to add new features. As an example, we have the modification of the W-76-2, where they took an original W-76 warhead of 100 kilotons and modified it to reduce the yield to something around 5 to 7 kilotons, giving American nuclear submarines a weapon capable of striking a specific target without annihilating the entire surrounding area. You might find it strange to reduce the yield of a nuclear weapon, but here it's important to understand the American logic, which is actually partially similar to the Russian logic when it comes to destroying targets. Very powerful nuclear weapons which wipe out entire cities might seem good for instilling fear and terror in enemies, but in practice, this would be very counterproductive. After all, if you kill most of the population of the other country, besides the ethical implications, there's also the issue of the region becoming uninhabitable for centuries. And if you kill all the enemy leadership, who are you going to negotiate the end of the war with? In this sense, smaller warheads capable of destroying only strategic and tactical targets that enable the enemy to act would be much more useful. And for that, there's no need for very powerful weapons. That's why they have a problem, which is that you can't keep refurbishing the same warheads forever. There's a limit. And that's just one of the problems, because other issues involve the obsolescence of the nuclear complex itself. For example, the facilities where the American warheads are stored are on average about 50 years old. And the processing of enriched uranium for American nuclear weapons is still carried out in a facility from the same era as Oppenheimer, built back in 1945. One area of concern for some American strategists is the country's ability to produce new plutonium cores for nuclear warheads, because during the height of the Cold War, America's production capacity for cores reached into the triple digits. And now it seems almost certain that a plutonium core built in the United States can be useful for about 80 years. So, in the post-Soviet world, American strategists basically ended the production of weapon cores and started focusing on using the thousands of cores they still had on hand and had inherited, which at the time were greater than the actual needs the United States apparently had. But we still have two other problems. The first is that you can't do this forever, and the second is that no one is 100% sure what happens when plutonium cores reach extreme ages. It's relatively uncertain how a 120-year-old plutonium core might behave. So Washington's goal now is that by 2030, the country needs to be able to produce 80 plutonium cores per year again, divided between two strategic locations. However, in 2022, state officials indicated that even reaching this production of just 80 warheads per year by 2030 will likely not be possible, and the Accountability Office identified between $18 and $24 billion as the potential costs just to achieve this capacity. That's why the big debate now is that without new plutonium cores, eventually American warheads could lose their safety, reliability, and even their basic functionality. Do you remember a few months ago a certain person who was fanatically anti-Russia saying that maybe Russian warheads don't even work anymore? Well, that risk isn't exclusive to the Russians. And when it comes to something like a nuclear warhead, those three factors are the highest priorities. And besides the concern about upgrading the warheads, there's also the American concern about upgrading the mechanisms for deploying them. Starting with the main strategic deterrent on land, their intercontinental missiles. Here, the plan is to replace all the Minuteman III missiles which entered service back in the 1970s with the new LGM-35A Sentinel. The plan includes purchasing 642 of these missiles to support a deployed force of 400 in addition to tests and reserves. The program intends to provide an initial operational capability by 2029 with all 400 missiles in service by 2036. But until then, these old Minuteman III missiles will have to keep serving. Currently, the United States nuclear missile silos are spread across 3 American states: Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming. And the doctrine implies that the focus of these facilities is first to house the land-based strategic deterrent and give North America access to a nuclear weapon capable of accurately delivering large warheads anywhere in the world. The second focus, in the event of a total nuclear war, would be to offer hostile nuclear planners additional priority targets to attack so that they spend more warheads trying to destroy these silos in Wyoming, Montana, or North Dakota. Since these are far from major American cities, this would end up minimizing potential damage in case of an attack. To compensate for the risks to these states, the governments and politicians of these states receive a steady flow of federal dollars in economic stimulus for hosting these silos. But the most expensive component of the United States' nuclear modernization plans is the replacement of its 14 Ohio-class nuclear submarines with a new generation of 12 Columbia-class submarines, which are the largest nuclear submarines that the Americans have ever had, with the first new submarine of this class expected to join the fleet in 2031. And the total cost for the fleet is currently estimated at 139 billion United States dollars. Interestingly, despite the extremely high cost of this project, it is one of the few that is considered almost certain to be completed. It is very likely that the Columbia class, with its missiles and eventually new W-93 warheads, will be put into service. To minimize this waiting time, the Trident missiles and their warheads aboard the current O-rays have received some updates and changes in details that are not publicly known. In 2017, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists published an article about a new fuse system that was integrated into the W-76-1 warhead of the United States Navy. This system was designed to improve the flight path of a nuclear warhead against a target like a city. This improvement probably wouldn't make much difference, but against a fortified or extremely deep target like an enemy nuclear silo, an improvement in the fuse could mean that fewer missiles need to be fired to be confident in destroying their targets. And by doing this, without using a larger nuclear warhead, we're talking about minimizing collateral damage. As for the United States Air Force, they've been receiving more than just upgrades for their silo-based missiles. They're also getting a new strategic bomber that's still classified, at least as of the recording of this video, the so-called B-21 Raider, capable of both nuclear and non-nuclear missions, as well as a new nuclear-armed cruise missile for the B-52, the long-range standoff, which is a program that could provide about 1,000 missiles, with the estimated cost per long-range standoff missile being between 5 to 10 times higher than other cruise missiles used by the United States. And finally, the strangest item in the United States nuclear modernization program, which is the B-61 bomb. These conventional nuclear weapons dropped by aircraft were designed during the 1960s and are undergoing another life extension program and a guidance kit to give them the same accuracy as the conventional Joint Direct Attack munition bomb. This weapon can be used in a variety of scenarios through F-35 fighters or some other equivalent delivery platform within bombing range of the target. At first, the decision to continue retaining and modernizing the B-61 is the current system used in nuclear sharing agreements with various NATO countries. It's the only planned way to give the F-35 a nuclear strike role. In addition, these United States nuclear programs, estimated in 2021 by the Congressional Budget Office, would cost approximately $60 billion per year for the United States nuclear arsenal between 2021 and 2030, mainly driven by new missiles and submarines. But 2 years later, the estimate for 2023 to 2032 rose to $76 billion per year. And that's not just the cost of modernization. That cost is to maintain the current nuclear capability that was inherited from the Cold War without any losses or damage to the nuclear structure. An absurdly high cost, even for the United States, which, as I said at the beginning of the video, believes it is necessary to be able to compete with two major rivals, China and Russia, which will be the country we talk about in the next video. Thank you all, I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, share the video with everyone you know, and if possible, become a member of the channel. Not only will you have early access to public videos, but you'll also have access to videos exclusive to members. Thank you all, hugs, and see you in the next video.